Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Build Beyond podcast. For this episode, I want to talk about what to do when things don't go well. We often will make a plan. The plan inevitably is going to fail. Plans don't always fail, but quite commonly, it's not very unusual for a plan not to go to plan. And I think what ends up happening is that a plan fails or there's some type of roadblock and people get discouraged, and then a lot of times someone's going to fall off track because of that. And so falling off plan needs to be part of the plan. But what ends up happening is that people will find excuses, and they will lie to themselves and tell themselves that their excuses are actually legitimate reasons. So before you go into anything that's going to be challenging, so this could be a weight loss journey, it could be some type of health journey, it could be a pain management journey, it could be anything. And for most people, it's going to be a combination of those things. You have to think about all of the things that could happen, that are probably going to happen, that are going to make it hard, but they are not reasons. They're not legitimate reasons. They're just going to be common excuses. So let me go over a legitimate reason. Let's say you're trying to make a change and a tornado hits your house and completely demolishes your house. That's a legitimate reason for a while to fall off your plan. Let's say you get a really bad infection and you end up in the ICU and you're on life support. That's a legitimate reason. Now, there are going to be certain instances that are reasons for some people, but excuses for others. So you're going, and that could vary depending on the goal as well. So you need to think about these things. One of the worst things that could happen is lying to yourself. Something comes up, there's a roadblock, you fall off track. It's not a legitimate reason. It's challenging, but it's an excuse. You could have stayed on track or you could have done something, and you tell yourself it's a legitimate reason. That ends up happening. And I feel like that is a common catalyst for people to fall off track for a long period. So a roadblock comes up. You could have stayed on track. You didn't. It was an excuse. You told yourself it was a reason. And then you never got back on track. Or then basically you have reprogrammed yourself to think that that excuse is a reason. And then every time it pops up, you've got a legitimate reason for why you fell off track. So you need to be honest with yourself about those things. And this is where it may be helpful to talk to a coach, to bounce some ideas off your coach to see what is a legitimate excuse, what is a reason, or what is a legitimate reason and what is an excuse. And keep in mind, those are going to change over time, and they'll be different with different goals. One thing that was really helpful that you can do in the Marine Corps, we did these things called after action reports. This could be, well, you do them after everything. So after a training exercise, you do them when you're deployed, after a convoy, or after a patrol. You're always going to do an after action report. An after action report is time to take ownership and talk about the things that went well, but also to document the things that went poorly. And we always address them in a specific format. So you would topic, discussion, and then recommendation. So what's the topic? We would discuss why it's an issue, and then we would make recommendations. The first time I ever experienced this in the fleet, I joined a unit as a brand new second lieutenant, and they had just come out of a long training exercise. I think they'd been out in 29 Palms for around a month. So I didn't go to that exercise, but I got to hop in on the after action report. And basically it was every company got an opportunity to come up and talk about the things that went well and talk about the things that went wrong. Topic, discussion, recommendation. And then operations was taking notes because we were going to repeat that training exercise at some point. So we were building or adding to a body of knowledge for that battalion. But then each individual person, leader, subordinate leader, was going to, if you're paying attention, take that information to other units. And it's an interesting environment because you can't hide. Everybody else was at that training exercise. Everybody knows what went wrong. So you can't get up there and BS anyone. You have to air your dirty laundry, and you have to take extreme ownership, and you have to come up with recommendations for how this could improve. That's a humbling experience. Now, as I got better at these, I started to realize that before I go up and brief my after action report, it was a lot easier to go talk to other leaders and say, look, I think these were problems. These are why they were problems. These are my recommendations for how to improve it. Am I missing anything? And you would get really good feedback. I always thought it was easier to go up and do those things if I had already talked to all the main leaders and they already knew what I was going to brief. It took a lot of stress off, and my brief was way better because I had more input. Now, you can do this as an individual. Just do a mini after action report. You have a plan. It didn't go well. You fell off track. So topic, discussion, recommendation. What's the topic? How did you fall off track? What was the roadblock? Discuss it. What led up to it? And why didn't you get right back on track? Talk about all the details before, during, and after. And then come up with recommendations, because it's likely you're going to see this problem again. And then the next time you see it, even if it throws you off track, you might be able to get back on a lot quicker. And sometimes you'll be able to see that roadblock coming and then sidestep it. And it doesn't veer you off track. So topic, discussion, recommendation, after action reports. Don't lie to yourself and tell yourself that your excuses are legitimate reasons. Take extreme ownership of your role and your shortcomings. And then you can't lose. You win or you learn. I think I heard that from Yellowstone. But it's good. So there's no loss. You either win or you learn. So that's a good way to learn from your mistakes. Falling off plan needs to be part of the plan. And that's all I got for you. I hope this short episode was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions.